My name is Adrienne Cross. I'm 33 years old, and my own family called Child Protective Services on my 5-year-old daughter while I was at work. They said she was a danger to her cousin because she didn't want to share her crayons. They told the caseworker I was unstable, neglectful, and emotionally abusive. But here's the thing. They've always been like this. My mother, Margot, is the kind of woman who hosts charity galas while quietly destroying her daughters behind closed doors. My sister, Vanessa, lives in Margot's guest house, gets weekly bank transfers from my accounts, and still finds a way to resent me. I was the reliable one, the responsible child, the one who paid the bills and fixed their messes, until I stopped. They didn't know that while they were whispering about my parenting in their yoga groups and Facebook mom pages, I was quietly documenting everything, every transfer, every email, every manipulated document, every lie. And when they finally realized I was building a legal case against them, they weren't scared. They were smug. They thought no one would believe me. Until the morning my lawyer served them in front of 143 guests at Vanessa's influencer baby shower. This isn't about revenge. This is about something deeper. This is about boundaries, about dignity, about protecting my daughter from a legacy of cruelty. So before I tell you what happened at that baby shower, how I watched my mother's face twist in public as the truth unfolded, and how I made sure my daughter would never doubt her safety again, go ahead and hit subscribe. Because this isn't just one family's secret. It's what happens when the scapegoat finally gets the receipts. And this time, I kept every single one. My story didn't start with CPS or baby showers. It started long before that. It started in a house where love was conditional and value was transactional. Growing up, I was never the favorite. That title belonged to my sister Vanessa, always had, always would. She was the golden child, the sweet, fragile one, too sensitive for the real world, my mother used to say. But that's why we protect her. Me, I was the responsible one, the doer, the fixer, the girl who didn't cry when things fell apart, the one they knew would never say no because, if I did, the consequences were subtle but sharp. Silent dinners, cold stares, entire weekends spent pretending I didn't exist. That pattern followed us into adulthood. After college, I landed a job as a junior analyst at a tech startup in Chicago. I worked insane hours, built myself up, made smart decisions. I bought my first condo at 28, paid off my student loans a year later. At 30, I was promoted to lead UX strategist and started consulting on the side. I wasn't flashy. I didn't talk about money, but I had it together. Vanessa, on the other hand, was still figuring it out. She started a mommy blog after getting pregnant at 25, moved back home just until the baby comes, and somehow never left. My mother framed it as noble. She's choosing to raise Aubrey full-time, she'd say at dinner parties, ignoring the fact that I was covering the cost of that full-time life, from groceries to doctor visits to Vanessa's $2,000 DSLR camera for her content creation. At first, I told myself it was temporary. I was the older sister. I could help. But temporary turned into years. I remember one moment clearly. It was tax season, maybe 3 years ago. I was reviewing my bank statements when I noticed a wire transfer, $700 to $800 to my mother's account. Not unusual on its own. She had access, technically, to my secondary checking account just in case of emergency. I called her. "Oh, honey," she laughed. "That was for Vanessa's dental work. She was in so much pain, and I didn't want to bother you at work. You understand, right?" That phrase, "you understand, right?" It was less a question and more a command. The kind of thing that only works on people who've been trained since childhood to avoid conflict at any cost. Another time, I showed up at my mother's house for Thanksgiving and found Aubrey wearing a designer coat, the exact coat I'd ordered for my daughter Amelia. Same brand, same color. The gift was missing from my closet, and there it was, zipped up on another child. "Oh, Adrian," my mother said breezily. "It didn't fit Amelia. No big deal." Except it hadn't even been opened. The box was still sealed when I last saw it. That's the thing about emotional manipulation. It doesn't always look like screaming or slamming doors. Sometimes it's dressed up as generosity. Sometimes it wears a smile and calls itself family. I learned to suppress my discomfort, to rationalize, to remind myself that this was what families do: support each other. Look out for each other, even if that support only ever flowed in one direction. By the time I had Amelia, I was essentially bankrolling 3 households: mine, my mother's, and Vanessa's, mortgage deferments, credit card top-offs, car repairs. I didn't track every transaction, but I knew the rough numbers. In 2021 alone, I sent over $38,000 to my family. None of it was ever acknowledged, not once. No thank you cards, no emails, not even a casual "we appreciate you" over brunch. Instead, I got passive-aggressive comments about Amelia being a little bossy or too independent. Subtle jabs that made me feel like maybe I was doing motherhood wrong, even while funding theirs. It all came to a head last year, during what should have been a routine weekend. Amelia had a mild fever. Nothing serious. I had a client call scheduled and asked if my mother could watch her for 2 hours. Her house was 5 blocks away. Amelia knew the place, loved the garden, felt safe there. Margot said no. Just no. No explanation, no apology, just a clipped "I can't today." That was the moment something shifted. Not because she declined, she had every right to, but because of the tone, the coldness, the underlying message: you are only valuable when you are giving. I remember sitting in my car after that call, engine still running, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. And for the first time, I asked myself a question I'd never dared to ask. What if I stopped giving? What if I stopped paying? Stopped explaining? Stopped trying to earn love that had always been conditional? That question sat with me for weeks. It followed me through boardrooms and bedtime stories. And the longer I sat with it, the clearer the answer became. They didn't love me. They loved what I provided. They loved the convenience of me. So I did something that surprised even myself. I started saying no, quietly, calmly. No drama, no declarations. When Vanessa texted asking for help with Aubrey's preschool deposit, I replied, "I'm not in a position to assist right now." When Margot hinted that the landscaping crew was getting expensive, I said, "Maybe it's time to scale back." I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I didn't justify. And at first, they didn't notice. But I did. Because for the first time in my life, I felt the edges of my own identity, not as someone's daughter or someone's safety net, but as a whole person with limits. They didn't know what I was building, but I did. And that's where everything started to change. You'd think the turning point would be loud. A screaming match, a dramatic door slam, a tearful goodbye. But it wasn't. It was a voicemail. I was in the middle of a client pitch, one of those high-stakes calls where you either land a $40,000 retainer or you don't eat for a quarter. My phone buzzed. Then again, I ignored it. When I finally checked during lunch, there were 6 missed calls. 2 from my mother, 3 from Vanessa, 1 from an unknown number, and 1 voicemail that made my heart stop. "Hi, this is Kelly with the Department of Child and Family Services. We received a report concerning your daughter, Amelia. Please call us back as soon as possible." My hands went cold. I played the message again and again. Amelia was with her after-school sitter, safe, happy. I just texted her an hour ago. What could possibly be wrong? I called back immediately, heart pounding. The caseworker was polite, but distant. She told me they'd received a tip from a concerned family member that Amelia had pushed her cousin to the ground, and that I was emotionally unstable and possibly abusive.
That word, abusive? I've handled million-dollar UX builds with less panic than I felt in that moment.
I raced home. Amelia was fine, laughing, coloring, completely unaware that anything was wrong. The sitter hadn't noticed any change. She said Amelia and Aubrey had played together like they always did, maybe a little argument over markers. Nothing physical, no pushing, no yelling. The caseworker came by that evening. She was professional, asked to see Amelia's room, checked for bruises, interviewed me separately. I told her the truth. I even showed her the text from the sitter, timestamps and all. Amelia wasn't removed from the home, but they opened a case as standard procedure. Still, for 3 days, I barely slept. Because even if I wasn't afraid of losing Amelia, I was terrified of what this said about how far they were willing to go. I confronted Margot first. I didn't even finish asking before she cut me off.
Well, she said sharply, maybe if you were a little more involved, people wouldn't be so concerned.
Vanessa's reaction was worse. She didn't even deny it.
I didn't think they'd actually open a case, she said, arms crossed. But maybe it's a wake-up call. Amelia's been really aggressive lately.
Aggressive. She was 5. She didn't want to share a toy. That was the moment I stopped caring what they thought of me, because I saw it clearly they weren't trying to help me parent. They were trying to punish me. For setting boundaries, for saying no, for walking away. So I made a decision. Not a dramatic one, a strategic one. If they were going to weaponize systems against me, I would use the system better. That night, after Amelia fell asleep, I opened my laptop and started documenting everything. Bank statements, emails, Venmo requests, the 7,800 dental transfer, the missing birthday gift. Every instance I could remember where my money or name had been used without permission. I filed Freedom of Information Act requests for the CPS case logs. I requested credit reports. I even hired a legal assistant discreetly to comb through old property filings connected to Margot's home, which I'd partially funded years ago. I also began slowly separating my finances, closed the joint emergency fund, opened a new account under an LLC, transferred Amelia's college fund to a protected 529 plan, blocked auto access to any secondary cards. And I said nothing.
No announcements, no arguments, just distance, paper trails, and time.
Vanessa didn't notice. She was busy rebranding her blog into a TikTok account, selling overpriced parenting routines and affiliate links. Margot was still posting her brunch photos, pretending she lived in a Nancy Meyers movie.
Meanwhile, I was rebuilding, but this time, for me.
I added 2 new consulting clients, took a short course in digital litigation prep, found a therapist who specialized in adult children of narcissists.
And most importantly, I started showing up differently at work, with friends, even with Amelia.
I stopped over-explaining, stopped apologizing for needing space, started trusting myself more than I trusted their opinions. 3 months after the CPS incident, I got a message from Vanessa. It was casual, like nothing had happened. Hey, can you help cover Aubrey's ballet tuition this quarter? It's only $100.
Only?
I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, no. Just that one word. No period. No smiley face. No buffer. She replied with a single line, wow. Selfish much. I didn't respond, because that wasn't a conversation. It was bait. And I no longer took that bait.
I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was awake.
Awake to the reality that I'd spent my whole life trying to earn a version of family that didn't exist. Awake to the fact that I could still be a good mother, a kind person, a responsible adult, without sacrificing my boundaries to make everyone else comfortable. I didn't need revenge. What I needed was proof. And trust me, by then, I had more than enough. If there's one thing I learned during that year, it's this transformation doesn't start with rage. It starts with silence, with watching, with keeping receipts. While my family gossiped about how cold I'd become, I was quietly redesigning my life from the ground up. The CPS incident had rattled me, but instead of reacting, I responded with structure, strategy, and a spreadsheet. I made a list of every account, subscription, and financial obligation that had even a thread of connection to Margot or Vanessa. Within 2 weeks, I'd unwound almost all of it. Closed joint access cards, revoked shared medical permissions, froze the credit file linked to Amelia's social security number. I checked the logs. My mother had attempted to use my tax ID to apply for a line of credit the month prior. Denied.
Next, I turned to my business.
I'd always treated my consulting work like a side hustle supplemental income. But with my full-time job now flexible and remote, I saw the opportunity for more. So I incorporated Crosspoint Digital Strategy, LLC, registered, insured, tax protected. Within 60 days, I landed 3 new clients. One was a mid-sized beauty brand. The second was a health tech startup that signed a 6-month contract worth $72,000. The third, a Fortune 500 company testing a redesign, brought me in at $95 an hour, 20 hours a week, steady, low pressure, high return. By the end of that fiscal quarter, I'd earned more in consulting than my full-time salary.
And still, I told no one.
Not Margot, not Vanessa, not even the family group chat I hadn't opened in months. Instead, I upgraded my living situation. Amelia and I moved from our modest 2-bedroom condo into a townhome in Lakeview Safe. Quiet, close to parks. I didn't post about it. No housewarming, no look at me moment, just peace. Meanwhile, the cracks in their world started to show. Vanessa's influencer account, once filled with perfectly filtered photos of Aubrey's snack plates and matching mommy-daughter outfits, had started to slip. Sponsored posts dried up, views dipped, and somewhere along the way, her followers noticed something odd. She was frequently complaining about ungrateful family and jealous energy. Code. Of course. For me. Margot didn't say anything directly. She never does. But I heard through a friend that she'd been quietly frustrated with how I'd abandoned the family. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so sad. What they didn't know was that I was preparing something else. For months, I'd been building a full legal archive. A clean, indexed record of every instance of financial misuse, unauthorized transfers, emails where Vanessa claimed I owed her for raising Aubrey so well, proof that my mother had leveraged my good credit to co-sign for a home equity line on her property without my consent. I had copies of property deeds, transaction logs, emails, text threads, all organized, all time-stamped. And then, I found the file that broke something in me.
A document, dated 4 years earlier, with my digital signature forged, transferring my part of our late grandmother's inheritance entirely to my mother for safekeeping.
$63,000. Gone. Without my knowledge. I remember staring at that PDF, hands shaking, realizing that they hadn't just taken advantage of me, they'd stolen from me. And I never even saw it. But now I had the proof. I had a timeline. I had a case. I reached out to a corporate attorney, someone I'd once consulted for UX work. She read through the file and said 5 words that changed everything. You're sitting on a gold mine. I didn't want to sue. Not yet. I wasn't after revenge. I wasn't looking to humiliate them publicly, not unless they gave me a reason. But I wanted them to know I knew, to feel the ground shift. So I waited for the perfect moment. And it came, of course, as all family drama does, wrapped in a bow and disguised as a celebration. Vanessa was pregnant again. Baby number 2. New content opportunities. More sponsorships. She planned a huge gender reveal and baby shower hybrid, complete with a balloon wall and a brand activation corner. 150 guests. Local press. Catering. #ready. I got an invitation in the mail. Gold-foiled. Embossed. With my name misspelled. No personal message. No call. Just a performative gesture to maintain the image of unity. And I RSVP'd, yes. Not because I wanted to go, but because I needed witnesses. In the weeks leading up to the event, I worked closely with my attorney to finalize a formal notice, a cease and desist tied to identity fraud, forged documentation, and financial exploitation, all backed by records, including expert analysis on the forged signature. I also prepared an email with everything set to go out to my family's extended network and close friends the moment I gave the signal. Then I hired a process server, a professional, discreet, efficient. The plan was simple. Let them pretend. Let them smile. Let them feel untouchable. And then drop the truth like a stone in still water. So when that Sunday arrived, Amelia and I dressed in muted navy and soft gray. Clean, sharp, neutral. I didn't come to fight. I came to finish. The house was packed. Guests sipping mimosas, Vanessa in pastel pink, faking surprise at every compliment. Margot buzzing between groups, talking about legacy and raising strong women. They had no idea. At exactly 1:47 p.m., during a lull in the speeches, the server approached Margot. He was polite, calm, handed her the packet with a single sentence. "Mrs. Cross, you've been served." The room went silent. Margot's face froze. Vanessa blinked, and then a whisper rippled through the crowd fast. Electric. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Because 5 seconds later, phones buzzed. The email went out. Screens lit up. Receipts. Screenshots. Documents. The works. All of it. And just like that, the illusion cracked. The moment that packet hit Margot's hands, everything stopped. You could hear the ice melt in the champagne glasses. At first, she just stood there, holding the envelope like it was radioactive. Then her fingers tightened, her jaw set, and just loud enough for the front row of guests to hear, she hissed, "This is ridiculous." But it wasn't. Because while she stood there trying to regain control, phones around the room started buzzing hard. My email, titled "In Defense of Boundaries," had landed. Inside was a simple message. No drama, no venom, just the truth. Attached were PDFs of the forged inheritance transfer, bank withdrawals with unexplained memos, screenshots of Venmo requests tagged "You owe me," and tax records showing assets under my name but not in my possession. There was no spin to hide behind, no misunderstanding to blame. It was all right there, black and white. Vanessa's face turned pale. She stepped away from the dessert table, phone clutched in her hand, reading. Someone gasped near the bar. A cousin started whispering. One of Margot's friends from her charity board turned and walked out, quietly shaking her head. It was surgical. I hadn't made accusations. I'd presented evidence. And the thing about evidence is, it doesn't scream. It doesn't accuse. It just shows. Still, the real damage wasn't just in the facts. It was in the timing. This was their moment, their carefully curated event, designed to remind everyone of their grace and status and perfect family image. And now that image was in flames. Vanessa came at me first. She didn't scream, not yet, but her voice cracked as she snapped, "What is wrong with you?" I met her eyes calmly. "You forged my signature on a legal document," I said, "and you took my child's safety and used it as a weapon." "You think you're better than us," she shot back, louder now, eyes darting to the crowd. "I think I finally stopped letting you pretend you were." Margot stepped forward then, shaking, hand clenched tightly around the envelope. "You always had a flair for theatrics, Adrian," she said coldly, "but dragging family into public disgrace, that's beneath you." No, I said. What's beneath me is being used, lied to, manipulated, stolen from. Someone behind her whispered, "Wait." She forged her daughter's signature. And that was it. The dam broke. Voices rose. Guests exchanged texts mid-conversation. My uncle cornered my mother with questions about the inheritance. Vanessa's husband looked like he wanted to disappear. And Margot Queen of the neighborhood brunch circuit stood paralyzed. They tried denial first. "That's not what happened. You misunderstood. It was an oversight. Family is messy. Adrian, you don't just burn it down." But they'd already lost the room. Because this wasn't about my word versus theirs. This was documented, verified, time-stamped, and served legally. It was over. Still, they tried to pivot. I expected it. Margot claimed she'd been protecting me from bad investments. Vanessa insisted the money was always meant to be shared. They tried every manipulation trick they'd ever used. Guilt, pity, shame, but it was like watching a magician perform a routine after the secret's been revealed. It didn't work anymore. Because I wasn't playing defense. I was done playing at all. I stood tall, took Amelia's hand, and simply said, "We're done here." And we left. No drama, no tears, just calm. But that wasn't the end. Because while they panicked, I followed through. My attorney filed for damages. We didn't press criminal charges yet, but we froze access to any shared financial accounts and requested an audit of my grandmother's estate. The court ordered Margot to produce documentation for every transfer within 30 days. Spoiler alert, she couldn't. Vanessa tried to spin the narrative online, claimed I was jealous, estranged, unstable. But her followers weren't buying it, not after screenshots of her text messages surfaced in my email attachment. She lost a brand partnership within a week. Another company suspended her pending internal review. And Margot. The charity board respectfully asked her to step down after a donor raised concerns about fraud. Her social circle, built on carefully polished lies, started crumbling under the weight of truth. 3 weeks later, I received a handwritten letter from my father. We hadn't spoken in years. He'd divorced my mother a long time ago, then moved states. His note was short. "I always knew you were strong. I'm sorry I didn't do more. Proud of you." I cried when I read that. Not because I needed his approval, but because, for once, someone had seen me. By the end of that month, the emails stopped. The calls stopped. Even the guilt-tripping group messages fell silent. The silence wasn't empty. It was earned. Because I had given them every chance for years to treat me with basic decency, and they chose exploitation every time. So I chose freedom. What happened at that baby shower wasn't revenge. It was a reckoning. And they're still living in it. It's been over a year since that day. Since the baby shower. Since the email. Since the silence. And here's what I've learned. Peace doesn't always come from reconciliation. Sometimes, it comes from release. I haven't spoken to Margot or Vanessa since the court finalized the estate audit. They each received a formal notice of financial misconduct and were ordered to repay partial damages. It wasn't the full amount, but it was legally acknowledged, and that meant more to me than the money ever did. Vanessa tried to reach out once, just once. She sent a 3-sentence email, months later, right before Christmas. No apology, just a vague mention of family unity and letting the past go. I didn't respond. Not out of spite, but because I'd already let it go. And responding would have been dragging it back in. Margot hasn't reached out at all. Not directly, but I heard through a mutual acquaintance that she's still telling people I overreacted and blew things out of proportion. That's fine. Let her. Because the difference now is, I don't need her to understand. I don't need her to validate what happened. I was there. I lived it. And I documented all of it. What matters is that Amelia is safe. She's thriving, confident, laughing more, sleeping better, drawing entire storybooks full of heroes who look like her. And me, I finally feel like I'm parenting from a place of strength, not survival. We moved again not far, just a little closer to the lake. We adopted a dog. His name is Baxter, and he follows Amelia around like he's assigned to her full time. She thinks it's hilarious. Business is good. I've spoken at 3 women in tech panels about boundary setting in toxic systems. One of those talks led to a podcast episode that went semi-viral, thousands of messages from people who said, "I thought I was the only one." And I realized what happened to me wasn't rare. It was just rarely spoken about. So I started speaking, not as revenge, not as a warning, but as a blueprint. I talked about how love without respect is just control, how family isn't defined by blood, but by behavior, and how the people who claim you're too sensitive are often just too used to crossing your boundaries unchecked. I tell people this now, and maybe it's something you need to hear too. You're not broken for walking away. You're wise. Because forgiveness doesn't always mean reunion. Sometimes it means refusing to let their version of you control your story anymore. And that's what I've done. I've rewritten mine. Not out of rage, not out of resentment, but out of deep, quiet love for myself, for my daughter, and for the version of me who spent years hoping they'd change. She deserved better, and now she has it. We still drive past that neighborhood sometimes, the one where Margot lives. Amelia doesn't remember much. She thinks of it as the place with the stone lions. She asked once why we don't visit anymore. I said, "Because we only visit places where people are kind." She nodded, like it made perfect sense. And in her 5-year-old way, it did. It's not that I hate my family. It's just that I finally understand that love should never require self-abandonment. That dignity and silence are not the same. That boundaries are not betrayal. And that sometimes the greatest act of love is simply to leave. So if you're listening to this, and nodding quietly to yourself, if you've ever felt like the one who always gave, always smoothed things over, always swallowed your truth, I want to tell you something. You're not alone, and you're not crazy. You're just the one who finally had the courage to name the dysfunction, and that makes you powerful. So tell me in the comments, when was the moment you realized you were done being the strong one? What helped you break free? Because your story matters too. And trust me, someone out there needs to hear it. Sometimes, after everything calms down, after the legal letters stop, after the inbox stays empty, after the noise fades, you start to wonder, was it all real? Did that really happen to me? Was I really the one who stood in the middle of a 150-person event and brought down an entire illusion, not with a scream, not with rage, but with a signature and a file? And the answer is yes. I lived it, and I survived it. But survival isn't the end of the story. Because what no one tells you is that when you finally break away from dysfunction truly, cleanly, you don't just get your life back. You get choices. You get to rebuild. And not as a version of yourself who's constantly looking over her shoulder, waiting for guilt to creep in, or bracing for that phone call that sends you spiraling again. No, you rebuild as someone new, wiser, stronger, calmer, and finally, free. And that freedom doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like sleeping well, like opening your front door and knowing everyone inside is safe, like pouring your coffee in the morning and realizing your body isn't tensed anymore, like you've exhaled after holding your breath for years. I've learned how to say no now without apology. I've learned how to spot manipulation, not by how loud it is, but by how subtle it creeps in. And I've learned that family, no matter how tied by blood, is not owed access to your peace. That's not bitterness. That's balance.
When I think back on everything, the years of giving, the silence, the betrayal, I don't regret being kind. I regret believing that kindness had to come at the cost of my self-respect.
I look at Amelia, now growing, learning, watching. She sees everything. She notices more than I ever did at her age. And one day, when she's older and ready, I'll tell her the full truth. Not to make her hate anyone, but to teach her what I didn't learn soon enough, that love is not a transaction, that real family isn't built on guilt, but on grace, and that your worth was never supposed to come from how much you can tolerate. For now, I lead by example. I let her see what healthy love looks like, not loud, not dramatic, just steady, honest, and mutual. We have new holiday traditions now. We bake cookies in mismatched pajamas, decorate our own tiny tree, and invite over friends who feel like family. We call them our chosen crew. No pressure, no hierarchy, no eggshells. Just joy. I think what hurts most, looking back, isn't the betrayal itself, it's the realization of how long I allowed it. How many versions of myself I abandoned in the name of keeping the peace. But the good news? You can return to yourself at any time. You're never too far gone. And the people who try to convince you that setting boundaries is selfish, they're usually the ones benefiting from your lack of them. Let them be uncomfortable. You're not here to be palatable. You're here to be whole. I've made peace with the fact that Margot and Vanessa may never apologize. They may rewrite history in their circles. They may play the victim. They may even believe their own version. But I no longer live in that version. I live in mine. And mine is quiet, simple, free. So to anyone out there who's been carrying the invisible weight of being the strong one, the fixer, the peacemaker, the provider, I want you to know you don't have to carry it anymore. You can put it down. You can rest, and you can rebuild, not as someone who needs to prove their worth, but as someone who knows it. So if this story reached you, sit with that, let it sink in. And when you're ready, whether it's tomorrow or 10 years from now, tell your story. Because someone out there is still trying to make sense of the silence, still trying to name what happened to them, still trying to believe that healing is possible. Your voice might be the permission they didn't know they needed. So drop a comment, share a moment, tell us what boundary you've reclaimed or hope to. Because I promise you're not alone. Not anymore.